back for part 2. Thank you for the views, I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy the story previously. Weak. That's what you think, isn't it? That I'm weak. Naruto said, his ire increasing as he gave into his childish fit of anger, which was not surprising really as he was actually a child. The words seemed to hit his family like a physical blow, making his father Minato flinch while Kushina, Urza and Mito looked away from him. Finally it was Jiraiya who snapped, stepping forward and staring at Naruto with an impassive face that made the young blonde's body tense. That's exactly why, kid, you are weak. Your body is not strong enough to go through the strain of shinobi training, you can barely carry yourself from day to day. It's time you saw the truth, Naruto. You will never be a ninja. Jiraiya said, tired of all beating around the bush. It was time someone told the boy the truth. It was the best thing for everyone involved. Naruto had started taking steps back the more Jiraiya spoke, his words ringing in his head over and over. The tears he had been holding for so long finally started to escape his eyes and stream down his face as people backed away from him. No one seeming to be able to look him in the eye as he ran from the room. Chapter 2 Hard Facts. For a moment Kushina could do nothing but stand frozen as her precious son Naruto ran out of the room. As she watched him leave, tears trailing down his face, she didn't know what she was supposed to do. For the last few years Jiraiya had been warning them about not being straight with Naruto, quite firm in the belief that giving him false hope was many times crueler than just being honest with him. But how were you supposed to tell your child that they would never be able to live their dream, and that he was through no fault of his own too weak to do what every other member of his family did? Despite everything that had happened with the Kyuubi, the day the triplets were born had been the best day of her life. It had been the day she had become a mother. Not even that damn fox getting loose could ruin that, no matter what other people might think. Unfortunately though, her happiness couldn't last long. It had taken about a week for them to notice something was wrong with Naruto. He fed the same if not more than his sisters, yet despite his healthy appetite he didn't seem to gain any weight. His baby fat had been melting away more and more with each passing day, and his cries of discomfort never seemed to stop. It got so bad that they had to call in the doctors, and when the medical professionals did their tests what they found broke both Minato's and her own hearts. 2 years, 3 if they were lucky. That was how long the doctors had given him to live, and even then that was only with her baby boy living in the hospital with an IV hooked into his tiny arm. The feed constantly trying to give him the nutrients his own body just wasn't able to process. When he had been in the hospital the both of them had visited him every day, Kushina practically moving into the hospital with the girls for those 3 years. If not for his duty Minato would have been there with her, but they had made do with him making time to visit at least once a day. Kushina had watched every day as her baby seemed to wither away more and more, getting thinner and weaker every day that passed. He had been so small lying in that hospital bed, he had been fragile, like glass. Yes, those first few years had definitely been hard. Then the day came that the doctors told her that despite all the odds, Naruto had lived past what the doctors had called his danger age. The worst was behind them, and even though he would never be completely healthy, she could actually take him home again for the first time in years. That should have been the start of something better. They were finally a real family again. But Mito and Urza needed training to help prepare them for dealing with the fox. Urza had shown straight away that she had the Uzumaki bloodline, one that Kushina also possessed, solid chakra. And over the years Urza had demonstrated an understanding and a skill in it that Kushina herself had never had. Kushina could use it to make her chains with a blade on the end, and had even learned how to use them to suppress the chakra of anyone or anything she had caught in them. But Urza had taken the skill one step further. Her little girl seemed to be able to make almost anything with them, including actual armor of all things. Then there was little Mito, her other daughter, who while born without the Uzumaki bloodline, was slowly turning into a very adept sensory type shinobi. As where Urza found her passion in Kenjutsu, Mito instead found hers in Fuinjutsu. Like her father, she was fascinated by seals of all kinds, learning them, studying them and taking them apart to see how they worked. That coupled with her growing skill in taijutsu told Kushina that she would be a very strong kunoichi one day. In fact, both her girls would. Naruto though. Sometimes there were days he couldn't walk down the stairs without getting winded. Just the thought him even holding a kunai terrified her, let alone actually training with one. But when he had seen his sister's training he wanted to join them. Kushina had seen it in his face. Naruto wanted to be a ninja, her sickly little boy. Both Kushina and Minato knew that if he ever tried to unlock his chakra his weak little body might just break from the strain, let alone try and use it. So they instead tried to buy themselves time, explaining how they couldn't train as instead they needed to focus on getting his sisters ready because of the fox. They just wanted to wait until he was older and more mature, maybe then he would be able to understand that he just couldn't be a shinobi. But Jiraiya was right, even though she was angry enough to kill him at the moment Kushina knew he was right. Keeping on lying to Naruto like this was wrong, so maybe telling him the truth might be kinder in the long run. He had warned them from day one that to give Naruto false hope wasn't a kindness, and that he did not agree with what they were doing. He had even offered to try and help Naruto unlock his chakra, saying that it might actually help strengthen his body if it didn't kill him. But Kushina didn't want to take the risk, and had put her foot down. That was why Jiraiya had always kept his distance from Naruto. The man was unwilling to lie to him, but at the same time he knew it wasn't his place to go against the both of them, as they were his parents. Kushina also knew that if Naruto had ever asked him, the old pervert would have been more than happy to train him, and so he had tried to distance himself to avoid it. However, none of it changed anything right now, not after seeing her son running out of the room in tears with a heartbroken expression on his face. Turning a glare on the legendary shinobi, Kushina waited until she saw him flinch and look away in shame before running after her son. As she left, Kushina could hear Minato apologizing to the guests, before saying the party was over. By the time he had reached his room, Naruto's tears had given way to numbness, his face falling into an expressionless mask as he sat on his bed. His head was still ringing with Jiraiya's words, echoing over and over again. "You will never be a ninja. You will never be a ninja. You will never be a ninja." But the fact was all it had done was validate everything Naruto had already known, that his family thought he was weak. That they had been lying to him for years, and that they never actually intended to train him like Mito and Urza, never. Squinting slightly as he felt his eyes burn, Naruto shook his head thinking he was going to start crying again, not realizing that the pupils in his eyes kept bleeding out before receding again. Naruto found himself absent-mindedly palming the kunai that was still in his pocket, running a finger along the edge and making a mental note that it needed sharpening. He was actually about to take it out when he felt someone's chakra from downstairs break off from the rest and start up the stairs, the sound of their footsteps soon reaching his ears. If he had more experience, Naruto might have been able to tell how it was from chakra alone, but for now all he could do was tell that whoever they were, they had a lot of chakra. He didn't have to wait long, however, because a moment later there was a soft knock on the door before it was opened slightly, and the face of his mother could be seen through the opening. Naruto hadn't turned the light on when he had entered, making the light from the hallway cut through the darkness of his room only to end at his feet and leave the rest of his body in shadows. But while his face was hidden, Naruto could clearly see the concerned face of his mother, her eyes somehow finding his own in the dark even though she would be unable to actually see them. She made no move for the moment to enter his room, standing in the doorway and trying to squint as her hand reached for the light switch, only to let out a sigh when she did, and nothing happened, Naruto having removed the light bulb several days ago. "Naruto dear, we need to talk about this," Kushina said softly as she saw the shadow-cloaked figure of her son sat on his bed in the dark room. Naruto didn't answer straight away, trying to get his voice under control so it didn't break and show even more weakness than she expected from him. What exactly is there to talk about? You both have been lying to me for years. Constantly making promises you never intended to keep, giving me false hope. You think I'm too weak to even unlock my chakra, don't you? Naruto said, his voice as hollow as his gaze as he finally looked his mother in the eyes. He watched as she flinched at each accusation as if they were physical blows, tears gathering in her eyes. But at this moment in time Naruto just couldn't bring himself to care. As much as he loved his family, they had lied to him and that had truly hurt him. Seeming to give up on the light, Kushina walked into the room and sat on the bed next to him. And though she still couldn't see more than his outline, Naruto could still see her perfectly in the darkness. He could see her just as clearly as if it was day. Naruto, we should have been straight with you when you first asked us for training. Both your father and I knew from the start that we shouldn't have promised to train you. I am so sorry, we never should have lied to you. But we just couldn't. We thought if we waited until you were older it would be easier to explain things then. Kushina said quietly as she sat next to her son. She made to rest her hand on his shoulder in comfort, but pulled back when he flinched away from her touch as if it were poison. Pulling her hand back, a crushed look on her face, she instead lay her hand in her lap and looked down. You have to understand, Naruto, with your condition it is too dangerous for you to train. I spent hours talking about this with your father and even a few medic nin. We even considered training you in genjutsu at first. But simply unlocking your chakra could kill you. Your body is just not strong enough for the added strain. Naruto did understand, and though hearing that unlocking his chakra could have killed him, all her words did was make him angry. After all, hadn't he unlocked his chakra the day before? Sure, it had been painful at first, but nothing he couldn't handle. Clenching his hands on his knees as his eyes started burning again, Naruto somehow managed to ground out his words without resorting to shouting. But you never even tried. Never are. How do you know that it would kill me? Maybe it would help with my condition. Did you ever even consider that? Naruto said in anger as glared at his mother, finally giving into his anger. Another flinch, followed by a deep sigh. We did, and everyone we talked to agreed that if unlocking your chakra didn't kill you, it might help your condition. But it wasn't a risk we were willing to take, not when it could cost you your life. Kushina said in a pained voice as she tried to explain such a difficult topic to her 10-year-old son. Why was it your decision to make? If it's my life, it should be up to me, not you or anyone else. If you had just believed in me, I wouldn't have had to do. Naruto began, the anger not leaving him. If anything, it grew in him like a ball of molten rock. No. This time it was Naruto's turn to flinch. The hard expression suddenly appeared on his mother's face, stopping the words in his throat. Naruto, no matter what you think of us at the moment, your father and I have every right to make that decision. If it's a choice between your life or your ability to use chakra, there is not, and there never will be a choice. You might not understand it right now, but we could never risk losing you. Not again. This time when Kushina reached out to him, Naruto didn't move away, and was quickly pulled into a firm hug while she stroked the back of his head soothingly. They stayed like that for several minutes, neither saying anything as Naruto allowed himself to take comfort in the familiar embrace. When they finally did separate again, Naruto saw his mother had tears in her eyes, but that she also had a small smile on her lips. It's getting late and a lot of things have happened today. I'll let you get some rest, and your birthday presents will still be downstairs tomorrow when you wake up. If we need to, we can talk more about this in the morning, but we will not change our mind on this, Naruto. Unlocking your chakra is not worth risking your life over. Naruto stayed silent as Kushina slowly stood up and left, closing the door behind her. He listened as she stood outside his door for a moment, before letting out a sigh that was muffled by the door and walking back downstairs. Letting out a sigh of his own, Naruto lay down on his bed still clothed with one arm over his eyes as he finally let sleep take him. The next morning Naruto was set to tell his family that he had unlocked his chakra, and while he knew they would be angry with him, he knew it would all be okay in the end. He had proven he wasn't as weak as they thought he was, and now they would have no choice but to train him along with both Mito and Urza. Unfortunately, while they were all sat eating dinner, both his mother and father were called for an emergency council meeting, and had to leave before he had a chance to tell them. They had left with Kushina promising they would talk after the meeting was over, but Naruto knew from experience that these meetings could take hours. Mito had quickly taken over the table after breakfast to work on her seals, writing the same ones over and over again until she got it perfect before trying to do it faster. Urza had relocated herself to the training room to practice her kenjutsu, muttering to herself about needing to work on her spear-wielding skills. With nothing else to do, Naruto had decided to look through the presents he had gotten last night, but had left before opening to upset with the whole situation to stay downstairs. Shikamaru had given him several new chess sets, each styled to look like ninja from each of the 5 great hidden villages. Choji and his family had given him a cookbook, with hundreds of different recipes. He had even gotten a bonsai tree from Ino and her father, along with the equipment he would need to care for it. There were several other presents from the different clans along the same lines. All of them unsurprisingly avoiding being anything to do with shinobi training, unlike what had been given to his sisters. He did end up with a decent amount of money through, which he was sure would be useful. It wasn't surprising really, there was not a whole lot known about it. So it would no doubt be difficult to buy presents for him. When he had come to a small bundle wrapped in paper with pictures of toads on it, Naruto had debated for several minutes on just throwing it away before putting it down and ignoring it. Then he came to the presents from his family. Mito had given him a notebook filled with blank pages of high-grade paper, with Urza giving him a set of charcoal pencils for drawing. Somehow he thought it might be a cooperative gift between the two of them. His parents had given him a framed picture of all of them together in a group, a perfect family, all them smiling at the camera. It had Naruto standing in the middle with Urza on his right and Mito on his left, both hugging his arms to themselves, huddling his smaller frame between them. His mother and father were knelt behind them, Minato with his arm around his wife's waist and Kushina giving the peace sign, a large grin on her face as she looked into the camera. Naruto remembered it being taken a week before they had started training his sisters, back when they were one big happy family. Letting out a sigh after seeing the picture, Naruto got up and decided to go for a walk to clear his head, knowing his parents wouldn't be home for another few hours at the least. He didn't bother telling either of his sisters he was going out, planning on being back before they really noticed. He also didn't want to risk one or both of them insisting they come with him, which especially after his outburst last night he knew had no doubt they would do. Using the same method as when he left to unlock his chakra, Naruto made his way over to the loose board in the fence and into the forest without any particular destination in mind. Just wandering, letting his feet take him where they may. Yet after about half an hour of just walking and using his newly discovered sensory ability to feel the different things around him, Naruto somehow ended up back in the same clearing he had unlocked his chakra in before. The body of the hawk he had killed was gone, though judging by the trail of blood and feathers Naruto guessed a fox must had found it and taken it back to its den. After looking around the clearing for a moment he gave a small shrug before walking over and sitting on the rock that was stuck up slight, protruding from ground in the middle of the clearing. Naruto wasn't sure how long he had been sat there. Simply listening to the wind blowing through the leaves and feeling the thousands of tiny chakra signatures of the insects crawling around in the grass below him. However, because of how focused he was, Naruto didn't even realize as the world around him was slowly slipping away. Well, I must admit this is a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting to see you again for another few years. A soft sibilant voice spoke up, breaking Naruto out of his meditative trance. Naruto's eyes shot open at the sound of the voice, only to widen in shock at what he saw. He was stood on what seemed to be a stone wall acting as the border between two landscapes, both of them as different as night and day. Literally. On the landscape to his right it looked like the forest that surrounded Konoha, covered in tall lush trees and bathed in bright sunlight, and in the distance there was what looked like a lake. Everything looked alive and healthy, and the air was filled with the sense of nature, and even though he couldn't see any actual animals, it still felt like being in the middle of a peaceful forest. The sky was mostly clear, with the odd clouds slowly floating by in the clear blue sky. The land on his left was the complete polar opposite, however, it seemed to have been bleached of all color. The earth was barren and was covered in dry sand, that was as white as bone and swirled around in the air, pushed about by the slight wind. Just like on the other side there were trees, but unlike the other side they were as dry and white as the sand and looked dead. Their shriveled branches looking like they were clawing angrily at the sky. There were also several rocky outcrops bunched together, their shadows seeming to be stretching further than should be possible. The stones themselves were black as night. And unlike its counterpart on the other side of the wall, there was absolutely no life at all. The wall Naruto was stood on was probably as tall as the Hokage mountain and looked almost 300 foot wide, and made from a dull gray stone. However, the thing that shocked Naruto even more was the fact that above his head there was a giant gray orb, very similar to the one he had eaten from the bird. Only with a purple center that seemed to act as the sun for both sides of the world. Not what you were expecting, I imagine. Just take your time and absorb it all. After all, it's not easy to see your own soul in physical form. The soft voice continued, echoing slightly. Naruto quickly turned around, looking for where the voice had came from, his eyes widening even further in shock as he found its source, Naruto taking a step back in fear as he did so. Standing on the wall not 10 feet away, was a boy the same age as him. But Naruto couldn't understand what he was seeing, because the boy looked like he could be his long-lost twin. He had the same face as Naruto, he even had the same whisker marks, but unlike Naruto, though, his short spiky hair was pure white and his skin had a grayish tinge to it. Sticking out of the top of his head were a pair of 4-inch long horns the same color as his skin, and unlike Naruto he was wearing a large baggy black shirt and a pair of black shorts. On his feet he wore nothing at all. He also had a knife without a guard, the handle wrapped in bandages tucked into the belt at his waist. As he stood before Naruto he had his hand resting on the handle. But the thing that really took Naruto back though were the eyes of the lookalike in front of him. Instead of white sclera were dark black, with dark veins spreading out onto the skin around his eyes like spider webs. Then there were the iris, 2 burning red eyes that stood out, making him look absolutely terrifying. Naruto watched as his mouth opened, revealing his sharp pearly white teeth and a long dark tongue as he chuckled slightly at Naruto's reaction. You're not going to piss yourself, are you? Because if you do I am not cleaning it up. The voice said mockingly. The teasing tone was easy to hear, but what was more unnerving was that it was said in Naruto's bright sunlight, and in the distance there was what looked like a lake. Everything looked alive and healthy, and the air was filled with the sense of nature, and even though he couldn't see any actual animals, it still felt like being in the middle of a peaceful forest. The sky was mostly clear, with the odd clouds slowly floating by in the clear blue sky. The land on his left was the complete polar opposite, however, it seemed to have been bleached of all color. The earth was barren and was covered in dry sand, that was as white as bone and swirled around in the air, pushed about by the slight wind. Just like on the other side there were trees, but unlike the other side they were as dry and white as the sand and looked dead.
But it's like, they don't really do it.
Their shriveled branches looking like they were clawing angrily at the sky. There were also several rocky outcrops bunched together, their shadows seeming to be stretching further than should be possible. The stones themselves were black as night. And unlike its counterpart on the other side of the wall, there was absolutely no life at all. The wall Naruto was stood on was as probably as tall as the Hokage mountain and looked almost 300 foot wide, and made from a dull gray stone. However, the thing that shocked Naruto even more was the fact that above his head there was a giant gray orb, very similar to the one he had eaten from the bird. Only with a purple center that seemed to act as the sun for both sides of the world. Not what you were expecting, I imagine. Just take your time and absorb it all. After all, it's not easy to see your own soul in physical form. The soft voice continued echoing slightly. Naruto quickly turned around, looking for where the voice had came from, his eyes widening even further in shock as he found its source, Naruto taking a step back in fear as he did so. Standing on the wall not 10 feet away, was a boy the same age as him. But Naruto couldn't understand what he was seeing, because the boy looked like he could be his long-lost twin. He had the same face as Naruto, he even had the same whisker marks, but unlike Naruto, though, his short spiky hair was pure white and his skin had a grayish tinge to it. Sticking out of the top of his head were a pair of 4-inch long horns the same color as his skin, and unlike Naruto, he was wearing a large baggy black shirt and a pair of black shorts. On his feet he wore nothing at all. He also had a knife without a guard, the handle wrapped in bandages tucked into the belt at his waist. As he stood before Naruto, he had his hand resting on the handle. But the thing that really took Naruto back, though, were the eyes of the lookalike in front of him. Instead of white sclera were dark black, with dark veins spreading out onto the skin around his eyes like spider webs. Then there were the iris, 2 burning red eyes that stood out, making him look absolutely terrifying. Naruto watched as his mouth opened, revealing his sharp pearly white teeth and a long dark tongue as he chuckled slightly at Naruto's reaction. "You're not going to piss yourself, are you? Because if you do, I am not cleaning it up," the voice said mockingly. The teasing tone was easy to hear, but what was more unnerving was that it was said in Naruto's own voice, and that surprise was enough to give Naruto a little of his courage back. "Who the hell are you?" Naruto said in a slightly shaky voice as he stared at the boy opposite in surprise. The boy just gave another chuckle and moved over to stand next to Naruto, before turning and looking out over the dark landscape, his hand still on his blade. "Relax, I'm not going to hurt you, not even sure I can, to be honest. After all, we are technically brothers," the boy said, not looking at Naruto as he continued to stare out at the dark landscape. Frowning at the boy's words as he stared at his back, taking note that he had exactly the same slight build as Naruto himself had. Naruto took a deep breath to steel himself before he moved so he's standing next to the terrifying-looking boy. "Who are you?" Naruto asked, calming down slightly now the boy was no longer looking at him with those terrifying, unnerving predator-like eyes of his. Naruto watched as the boy licked his lips, a habit he knew he himself had. "Well, now you see, that is quite an interesting question, as not even I am entirely sure of just who I am. Am I you, a stronger, more powerful version of you? Or am I something else entirely that has just taken your form? It really is quite the quandary, as in a way I am you, I know everything you know and I feel everything you feel. But yet, I also know so much more than you know, and have experience beyond what you have experienced." Voice continued curiously. The voice becoming more and more like Naruto's own soft-spoken tone as he spoke. What?" Naruto asked, his face scrunched up in confusion as he tried to dissect the boy's words. "I don't know. Just call me you, I suppose." The boy spoke up again, the intimidating aura he first gave off fading the more he spoke. "Wait, so I should call you Naruto?" "No, just call me you." "So call you me?" "No, you. Naruto. Are we really going to go this?" the mysterious boy said, his soft silky voice holding a note of amusement. "It is kind of fun," Naruto replied, a smile on his face as he argued with himself. He was to tell anyone in Konoha about this, they would no doubt think him mad. Though after his outburst last night, that may not surprise them, it was as he thought that Naruto's good mood came crashing down. Yeah, You have been having a pretty shit time of it recently, haven't you? The voice said crudely, the statement made all the strange by how calmly it was spoken. It was not really that surprising that the boy knew of Naruto's thought, he had said it himself after all, he knew everything Naruto knew and yet so much more. So where are we then? Naruto replied uncomfortably, the boy quickly changing the topic of the conversation, not quite ready or willing to talk it all out yet. Well, I would have thought that was obvious. I mean, we are obviously not in Konoha and you are talking to yourself. Yu replied blandly, only to frown slightly as he saw the confusion still on Naruto's face. Letting out a sigh, he decided to answer properly this time. We're in your mindscape, a physical representation of your mind and soul. But then why are you here? Why are we here? As he heard this question, the smile finally slipped from the now identified Yu's face, his lips slipping into a hard line as his eyes hardened slightly. Until 9 years ago I didn't exist. What I was before that even I don't know. What I do know though is that I came into being on the same day you did, but unlike you I was not born into the natural world, I was born in you. From what I have been able to theorize, I owe my existence to whatever your father Minato Namikaze did on the day the Kyuubi attacked. I gained form at the same time the Kyuubi was sealed into your sisters, and the form I gained was yours. What I was before that I don't know. But from what little I do know, there was another being present on the night your father sealed the Kyuubi into your sisters. To defeat the beast, your father used the Death Reaper seal, a technique that was designed by the Uzumaki clan centuries ago. It was a seal that was supposed to summon the form of the Shinigami into being. Now if things had gone as they should, your father would have had his own soul taken as collateral for sealing away the Kyuubi. But yet he didn't. You said, a frown on his face as he spoke. This was all just theories he had put together from the fractured knowledge he was born into being in possession of. Whether his theory was right or wrong, the boy did not know at this stage. It was then that Yu rolled his eyes and turned to face Naruto, before letting out a sigh. This is all of course just a conclusion I have come to based off of my knowledge and memories, but I believe that I was never meant to be self-aware or even exist. I think that when the Shinigami was summoned that night, something unexpected happened, something which led to me being created. I believe something was different about the seal he used, and that somehow a fragment of death's power was split off from the source, and instead of dispersing it clung to the closest available host. You. This led to the creation of me, a piece of foreign energy that gained sentience and was given life. It is a strange thought, isn't it, that from death there came life? Which I guess means you could say that I'm like a tailed beast's, a sentient mass of chakra, single piece torn from the whole. Which by the way would technically make you my Jinchuriki. Hearing that explanation, Naruto couldn't help but frown. It sounded bizarre, but thinking on it more he began to think that the boy may be right. After all, had he not devoured what he had come to believe was a soul just the other night, and also wasn't the art of Fuinjutsu very finicky? A single line, even a millimeter out of place, could drastically change the end result, and wouldn't his father have been in a hurry when he was drawing the seal he used to defeat the Kyuubi? That being said, though he was making a very strong effort to put the whole Jinchuriki of death thing aside for the moment, he could freak out about that later. He had other things he wanted to find out first. So you're really the Shinigami? You're not exactly what I was expecting. Naruto trailed off, deciding to embrace the explanation you had given him. After all, it was the only one he had heard. And the boy seemed sincere in his belief. This comment seemed to snap you out of his contemplative mood, a small smirk appearing on his face instead as he let out a slight chuckle. Well, technically, if I am right, which I believe I am, then I am just a fragment of the Shinigami, and am a whole other being entirely now. Thanks in part to you, Naruto. You said, a grin on his face as he saw the frown of confusion on Naruto's face. Besides, I am probably more similar to you than the Shinigami. I did after all grow up experiencing the same things as you did. Only I had other memories on top of that. Oh, and I was also better looking. We look pretty much exactly the same. True, true, except I have badass white hair and cool eyes. As you said this, Naruto once again looked at the boy's eyes, barely stopping himself from shivering as the two ominous red and black orbs looked at him. They were the eyes of a predator, an apex one at that. The white hair makes you look like an old man. Naruto managed to get out as he tore his gaze away from his counterpart's eyes, Naruto finally giving into his childish side. He had only just turned 10 after all. You're just jealous. You replied, a calm expression on his face as he did so. They were able to hold straight faces for all of 5 seconds before both burst out laughing at the same time, the situation so odd that it was hilarious. By the time they had calmed down, Naruto had completely forgotten his fear of you, and was using his shoulder to hold himself up and keep his balance. It was then that something Naruto had heard his parents telling Mito and Urza came to him, something important about Jinchuriki. Wait. If I'm technically a Jinchuriki, then why am I always sick? I thought Jinchuriki didn't get sick. Naruto asked, a frown on his face as he took a step away, his eyes taking in how his counterpart's body looked just as frail and gaunt as his own. Because you're not actually sick, at least not in the way everyone thinks. You replied confidently, knowing that what he said now was absolute fact. But the doctors. Naruto, I am not normal. I don't eat human food, and because of the way the seal that sucked me into you works, we are one. Just as I took on your form and characteristics, so too did you take on some of my traits. Your body needs a mix of human food and what you humans call souls. Like that thing you found floating above the hawk. Chakra is life energy, and when something or someone dies, it forms into a mass invisible to the normal eye. When you were a baby, your parents realized something was wrong, and you were diagnosed with that genetic disorder thing. The doctors didn't know about me, so they came to the only conclusion they could. It's all bullshit, of course. You just needed to unlock our chakra so you could see the souls and eat them. That's why I helped you find it last time you were here. So the more souls I eat, the healthier I get. Basically, yes. And just like in nature, your body and abilities have adapted in order to help you survive. You turned to look out over the side of the wall filled with life. Just as Naruto turned, he saw the first sign of animal life, a hawk breaking cover from the tops of the trees before diving back down and out of sight again. Look familiar? It should. Your mindscape is the afterlife for the souls you eat and imprisons them here, their energy feeding both of us while they continue to live on. That is why it's split in half. The light is the pure world and the dark is the impure world. That hawk we just saw was the one you saw when you unlocked your chakra. But animals don't have the same awareness as a human, meaning they cannot be good or evil, unlike humans who are responsible for their actions. Naruto found himself silently listening as you continued to speak, ideally watching as the hawk reappeared only to disappear again several times. I can see the life of the souls when they come. When you eat a human soul, it is me who processes them. The wall is the border between the two lands, a barrier that only we can cross. To put it more simply, you are the outer Naruto, whilst I am the inner Naruto. Together we are one. Unlike the Jinchuriki, though, we are a symbiotic life form. We cannot survive without working together, and if one of us dies, the other will quickly follow. As for all my claims, I am not the true Shinigami. I am not immortal, nor do I have absolute control over death. You said as he looked his counterpart in the eye, willing him to understand what he was saying, what he knew himself to be absolute fact. Nodding his head as Naruto once again met Yu's gaze, this time easily resisting the need to flinch. As he did so, Naruto knew what Yu said was true. He didn't know why and so would never be able to explain it, but deep down he knew. Seeming to have finished his explanation, Yu turned away from Naruto and once again looked out at the scenery as the blonde did the same. Naruto. You need to leave the hidden leaf. Naruto could actually feel his mind stop, all thoughts hitting an invisible wall as his eyes widened. What? But why? Letting out a sigh, you walked over to the edge of the wall facing what Naruto now knew to be called Pure World, sitting on the edge and fingering the hilt of his knife. Naruto, do you know what Jinchuriki are used for, besides containing tailed beasts? You finally spoke up, still looking over the peaceful forests and glades that made up the Pure World. Naruto could only shake his head in the negative as he slowly moved to sit beside you, the white-haired boy, letting out another sigh. Turning to face Naruto, you gave him a conflicted look. They might be the same age, but you, unlike Naruto, had fragments of memories and knowledge far beyond his counterpart. This made him more world-wearied, more experienced than Naruto, who in Yu's eyes was still so young and naive. They are weapons, Naruto, used both as a deterrent and when necessary tools of war. Your status as the son of the Hokage is enough to protect your sisters and maybe even you from the worst of it, but the fact is you are one of a kind even among other Jinchuriki. There has never been a Jinchuriki for anything other than the tailed beasts, let alone one with the abilities you possess. You are unique and have the potential to be very powerful, and even in the Leaf there are people that would try and use you for their own gain. But my family would probably fight and die to protect you, at first, but the fact is they also have the interests of the village to look out for. Why do you think it is so important for Mito and Urza to learn to control the Nine Tails chakra, not suppress it? Whilst it is in their best interests anyway, it is also in the interest of the village to have them strong. And more than that, Naruto, in the eyes of many, you would be an abomination, a being who needs to feast on the souls of others to survive. I doubt even our family could do much against the backlash and fear that knowledge, if it got out, would cause. But that is working of the fact that they themselves wouldn't fear us. We are unnatural, Naruto, and a fact of the world is that people fear that which is alien to them. Naruto found himself unable to look at you at this point, his eyes slowly becoming hollow as he thought of how his family would react. A part of them hoped that they would accept him, but that part was overshadowed by the fear that they wouldn't. Naruto had after all seen the reactions some of the villagers of Konoha had when they thought that people weren't looking. The civilians, they looked at his sisters with fear, and in some cases hate, and those two were the prized children of the beloved Hokage. Naruto, he was the black sheep of the family, already his presence unnerved people, that discomfort would be made 1,000 times worse if people found out the truth. And in Naruto's young mind, his parents who had already proven themselves untrustworthy by lying to him, they too might turn on him if they found out the truth. When he did look up again, the fear of abandonment and isolation on his face, he felt you lay a gentle hand on his shoulder. Turning to the boy, he say a kind and understanding look on his face. Naruto, I am not telling you this to hurt you, and if you want to stay in the village I will never say anything about this again. But you needed to hear this. People have been looking for a way to control or avoid death since man first understood the concept. You are a 5-course meal placed in front of a starving pack of wolves. At the moment they don't know you are there, but when they do they will fight each other and eat you alive. And nothing and no one will be able to protect us, not even ourselves, not unless we get stronger. Tears began to fall now, and the grip on his shoulder tightened slightly as his shoulder started to shake with suppressed sobs. I understand. We have to leave, it is not safe for us here anymore, and I don't know if Mom or Dad would support us. I just can't trust them anymore. Quote. Then we need to go, Naruto, carve our own path in this world. Become so powerful that we will never have to rely on others to protect ourselves. You said fiercely, watching as a fire seemed to start to burn in Naruto, a slight smile on his face as he did so. Deep down Naruto knew you was right, and as he stood there in that wall between light and dark he made his decision. He would become strong, he would become powerful, and never again will he have to feel as weak and powerless as he did now. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe. I'm not trying to push it down your throat, so I'm done for this chapter.